This episode is brought to you by Portland Distro. If you like underground music, movies, and more, go to portlanddistro.com for licensed merch, vinyl, CDs, and more. Plug in the discount code 10OFF, TENOFF, for a 10% discount at portlanddistro.com. Hey everybody, before we get going, I want to thank our newest Patreon member, Robert Dornenberg. Thank you for joining the team, and you're much appreciated. You might ask, what is Patreon? Patreon is a way that you can support the podcast for as little as $1 a month, which will allow you to have access to minimum 3, mostly 4 bonus episodes a month, in addition to the regular feed. At level 2, $5 a month, you have early access to all Everything Went Black content. And now, Unholy Portland. Hey everyone, it's another Unholy episode, and this is part 4 in our Unholy Portland series, and I hope everyone checked out the first 3 installments of this impromptu mini-series that we're doing within Everything Went Black. You know, the first part being our exploration of the new Murder Bait record. Part 2 was the interview with Casey, the singer, and founder and guiding creative force. And then the following, we had Davey from Dry Wedding. And now we have a sort of deep dive into the musical history of the influential city of Portland, Oregon. And of course, I'm doing that with Ralph. Ralph, how are you?
I'm doing excellent, sitting on my balcony, enjoying the sun on a cozy Saturday afternoon. Looking forward to this episode because, like, when I did research on it, I mean, I knew, like, there's a bunch of music, but I was like, oh, fuck, like, this, it blew my mind, like, how many important bands come from Portland.
Yeah, it's like, there's definitely a lot of bands, but I have I sort of ironically, I only have like a short list of bands that I really, really like from Portland. Though I acknowledge that there was a lot of influence coming out of that city.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I also have like it's just like more like, so like when I like rechecked all my notes like two bands, I'm like, okay, so wow, they're from there too. So it's incredible like how much music the city produced. And I mean, I think one of the most popular episodes we did was Unholy Minnesota, and where we talked about the Replacements and Huskadoo. And I was like craving to do like an installment of another city. And yeah, like it's the perfect timing now to do it with Portland since yeah, like look at what happened like when we did that Murder Bait episode, and I reached out to Casey, and then like we both got in touch with Casey, and then through that we got in touch with Davey, and now they're our friends. And these 2 guys are excellent. Their bands are fucking fantastic, and people need to sign them so like they can be out in the world. Someone needs to bring them to Roadburn, and yeah, now I'm super excited to dive into like the music in Portland that means something to us, like to me and to you and so many people out there.
Yeah, totally, man. And in my opinion, the kings of, I guess, underground or alternative music out of Portland would, in my opinion, be the Wipers. Greg Sage's band, the Wipers.
Yeah, definitely one of my favorite bands of all times. Super influential on so many things. Kurt Cobain was a huge fan of that and always quoted like that the Wipers are one of the reasons why Nirvana ended up being a 3-piece band. I mean, they perfectly fit our mold of like these twang bands, I always call them. I mean, we talked about the Gun Club, and we talked about Huskadoo, and the Replacements, and X, like a bunch of these bands, and the Wipers perfectly fit in there. There's something really special, and Greg Sage's like work on the guitar, the vocals, everything is just outstanding.
You know, it's funny, like, they formed in 1977, and in some ways, the bands that you just mentioned, I know this is like kind of like a bit of revisionist history because they were part of the punk scene, but
Yeah.
it's almost like American post-punk. You know, if you look at the Wipers, X, Gun Club, and maybe even the Cramps, you know.
Yeah.
The same way like Bauhaus is like a post-punk band or Joy Division, they refer to them as like post-punk. I think, but they have a uniquely UK British feel to them. The bands that I just mentioned have a uniquely American feel, but I would say that they're, kind of like post-punk in some ways.
Yeah.
I don't know. What
Yeah,
do you
it's
think? What do you
like
think of that statement I just made?
it's the thing is like it's like with post punk can be so much, and like what I think, like when you and I talk about post punk, we kind of like think in the same terms.
Yeah.
But then bands like the Talking Heads, they're like also post punk, and they come from like also the CBGB scene, and they developed and like they developed post punk. But I think they're not the same mold. And like people are like bands like Wire or Talking Heads, and so like I like them too. But like I like the darker aspect of shit, and so like the Wipers, they always have this melancholy to their songs. Even in the like they have uplifting songs, and they're like not a super negative band, but there's just something in their songwriting that just like appeals to me, and that is like the same way that Joy Division like got to me, and Bauhaus and all these bands. So like whenever I DJ, and like I do that sometimes here in the bar in Cologne, it's just like when I float through different genres throughout the night, and when I have my hour of like post punk shit, and then it's always like Joy Division and Wipers are close by with bands that I play.
Yeah, definitely. That's what I was kind of getting at, is that
Yeah.
these are like American bands that apply sort of American musical conventions, but still have that darkness to their sound,
Yeah.
and especially, I mean, for me, like I'm definitely, I love Greg Sage's work, but it all comes down to 1983's Over the Edge. Like that record for me was like really
Yep.
special, and
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't find out about that record until, the 90s, but that when I did discover that record, and coincidentally, I was living in Bellingham, Washington when I found out about them. It just like had such a deep melancholy like vibe to it, and like for me, the anthem of that record was Doomtown, which I think is
Yeah.
kind of a hit for them, right?
Yeah, and it's like again, like I'm not really surprised about the stuff you just said, because it's the same for me. Like I found out about them also, I don't know, like when I think it was through like interviews with Kurt Cobain, when he was talks about like Killing Joke, Flipper, and he also mentioned the Wipers, and then I was like, okay, like need to track down CDs back then. And I think I got the is this real CD or even a tape or something, and that must have been, I don't know, like mid '90s, and I liked it. And then I found like a CD version of Over the Edge, which I assume was like a bootleg CD, because it didn't have like a proper booklet. But yeah, man, then it starts out like with Over the Edge, and then like Doomtown. This riff, the way it sounds, everything about this song is so perfect. It's one of their hits, and it's definitely my favorite Wipers song. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out. I'm thinking back to like when I lived in Bellingham, so it was like probably like 1992 maybe, and yeah, it's that I always think of Bellingham whenever we talk about the Wipers. Bellingham is like 90 miles north of Seattle. It's right close to the Canadian border. And when I lived up there, I would go to Seattle to see shows, and I would also go to Vancouver on occasion too, which was fairly close, actually really close. And back then, it was easy to cross the border. It was like I barely had to show any kind of papers, or they just look at your license and you drive in. But when I started meeting people in Bellingham, I was a young guy back then, so I was out all night, hanging out with people, and there was tons of places to see live music in Bellingham. The Up and Up Tavern, the 3B, this place called Speedy O Tubbs, which was like maybe a 300 capacity room. And I saw like the Reverend Horton Heat play there. Like tons of bands came through there. And I saw Tad, I saw Screaming Trees, I saw Nirvana there, I saw Mudhoney, Melvins, you name it.
Oh man.
Yeah,
Oh man.
and small rooms too. Very like the largest venue was that 300 cap room that I just mentioned. And it was a really cool part of my life. But that's when there was a record store called Cellophane Square that was in Bellingham, right near the bus station, and there was also one in Seattle in the U District. And as I met people, and it was really easy to meet people, honestly, because coming from New York, I was very suspicious of strangers and very standoffish, and I guess not much has really changed, the way in my demeanor. But when I would go out to shows, and I remember I bought a Green River T-shirt, which is like kind of a legendary band, and I remember going to see a show at the Up and Up, and just some dude came up to me and he was like, "Oh, that's a really cool shirt." And they started talking to me, and I was like, "Oh, what's going on here? Is this guy trying to like fucking it's gonna like jump me outside or something?" I have this like really paranoid vibe, and so that's how you get people were very open back then. So within a matter of time, I had this network of people that I was friendly with, and everyone was talking about the Wipers and how they're such a great band, and and there's something that, oh, you never heard the Wipers, you should check them out, and remember back in the early 90s, the 80s, it was hard to find out about things. So this was like a word of mouth discovery for me. And then I went down to, Cellophane Square, and I picked up there was that one greatest hits record that they had that came out, I think after the first incarnation of the band disbanded, which I think was like around 89, they broke up. And I believe this greatest hits thing came out in the early 90s, maybe around their reformation, or or it was done in that hiatus period or something. And that's how I discovered the band, and it really fit neatly into what I was really into at the time and the kind of stuff I was listening to. I was like heavily into like Bauhaus and Joy Division, and really diving into like the post-punk stuff, as well as dipping my toe into the new alternative music stuff that was happening in the early 90s. So that's I always have like excellent memories about discovering the Wipers.
Yeah, that's like it used to be an absolute quality symbol to me. Like if people knew that band. Nowadays, it's like they become kind of like a insider hip thing. Like it is. It's like kind of the same with another band that we're going to talk about in a bit from Portland. That all of a sudden, like all the metal kids are into them.
The Wipers.
Yeah.
Really?
It's like a lot of They're like it's like the other band even more so. I won't spoil it now, but like there's like a lot of people that are into the Wipers now, like that heard of them through some channels all of a sudden, and it's just like, yeah, so you're into the Wipers now too. And I don't want to be like the posh asshole about this, but like I'm always happy if like people find out about this, but it's so obvious that like it's like this classic joke about like guys talking to girls that wear metal shirts, like, "Hey, name 3 songs of that band," and just like I feel like that asshole like this dude is like so you've got like a Wipers shirt, but you don't know shit about the Wipers, which is an asshole move to do, but I think I can do it sometimes, and the Wipers are just too cool. And funny enough, it's like another band that I'm going to talk about influenced like a bunch of bands in the time, like when we got to know each other, there was this hype going of like crust punk. And there was one German band called Doomtown. And it was one of the best of these neo-crust bands with a lot of like famous personnel from the German hardcore punk scene. And when we played with them, with Hellström, with my old band, I'm like, "So is this a reference to the Wipers?" And they were like, "Yeah, absolutely, of course, man, like the best band." And so it's like a lot of these crust kids back then, they were also into the Wipers, like the German crust punks at least.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I don't envision Greg Sage to be like an overtly crusty sort of guy or political or anything like that,
No, I also think like it's like with a lot of these like crust punks, of course they need to listen to their ours this that band. Um, but like some of them are just like out, like they hang out in squats doing speed, and like then there's like old punk playing. So I assume that's why they where they find the Wipers or something. I mean it's cool, and it's just like the Wipers are just like just an outstanding band. So like it's cool to see like how many people can find a liking with them, and that like how much their stuff speaks to them. And getting back to what you were saying earlier is the what I wanted to add is like the Wipers, and when you compare it to X or the Gun Club, or the other bands we're going to talk about in a bit, I think the Wipers actually sound like they sound like an American band, but they have like this heavy psychedelic element that is almost like, like Velvet Underground-ish,
Sure.
almost. Like, yeah,
I can see that. Yeah.
yeah. So like they have more like almost like a British appeal. Also, when you see Greg Sage, like in old live videos or photos, he could have been like a British punk that hung out with the Clash. And I think like especially with X and the Gun Club, there's a heavy Americana vibe going on. And the Wipers don't have that, I think.
Yeah, that's true. That is what sets them apart. Where like X and the Gun Club are dialing very deeply into like American lore within music.
Yeah.
Especially Jeffrey Lee Pierce. Like he was like way into the blues. You know what I mean? He was like a blues man. And when X had more of like a rockabilly country vibe to them, and Greg Sage's creative expression, was definitely not heavily into the blues and like country, not no country at all actually, and delving more into maybe that psychedelic Velvet Underground territory for sure.
Speaking of the X, just as a side note, have you heard like the new solo songs of John Doe?
I haven't actually.
Oh man, like I think I put one like the Never Coming Home, like was the first single from his new album. I put it in the X playlist. And this song, man, is a contender for Song of the Year. It's so good. And he just released a new song yesterday which features Essigine and also Shirley Manson of the band Garbage.
Interesting.
I haven't heard that yet, but like still kudos to that, like a small off-topic thing to X. Yeah.
Is the entire John Doe solo record out yet, or is it just singles that are coming out?
No, it's like I think there's 2 singles, and the album is coming out sometime soon. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I didn't realize that I thought the album had come out. Then you were telling me about that, but yeah.
No, yeah, but like something to look forward to. Like really, like this Never Coming Home, the single, the video, this is really good stuff, and I'm super happy that he's still able to pull off songs in that quality. I'm curious to see how good the record will be.
Yeah. So yeah, it kind of all started. I would say that Greg Sage put Portland, Oregon on the map for sure. And has a lasting, far-reaching influence on alternative music.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, for all you guys out there, Mike and I already did a playlist, and I mean, I went all in this morning, so this playlist has 50 songs now.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's a long thing, but there's a lot of good stuff. Like focusing on the main bands that we're going to talk about here, some inside stuff too. But if you haven't heard the Wipers, and you want to get into them or try them out, please go and check out the first 3 albums, because they're pretty much the best they did. And it's This Real, Youth of America, and Over the Edge, and preferably start with Over the Edge.
Yeah, that's got the single that we were talking about, Doomtown, is on Over the Edge. They also had a song on the Over the Edge, not Over the Edge, River's Edge. Sorry about that. 1986, there's a movie that came out called River's Edge, and it features a young Keanu Reeves, Ione Skye, and it's kind of like and also Crispin Glover is in it, and it's a kind of like obscure cult classic in some ways. It encapsulates this kind of low life culture from the 80s. most of the soundtrack is thrash metal, like Slayer, and I think Omen has a song in it, things like that. But there's a song from the Wipers record, Land of the Lost, called "Let Me Know," that is in that soundtrack.
Nice.
Yeah, a little esoteric there for you guys.
All right. Which band are we going to do next?
Well, in my particular pantheon of great bands from Portland, Poison Idea comes up next for me personally. And the funny thing about Poison Idea is that I like all their music, but it's very narrow. The one record I listen to all the time, and I listen to this record all the time, is Feel the Darkness from 1990.
Yeah, it is their absolute masterpiece, and unbelievable. Like, this band is so good and so cool, and like even the stuff they put out on Southern Lord, like years later, still like listen to it, and it's like high quality. I mean, even Metallica, like, who are actual connoisseurs of music, which they always showed in cover versions they did, even they covered Taken by Surprise by Poison Idea. So also very influential band. Some could say like it's a t-shirt band, because a lot of people have that iconic Skull shirt or the Feel the Darkness shirt. But yeah, Feel the Darkness is just one of these records that has like, I think it defines something that hasn't been done that way before, like metallic punk rock, like punk with like metal guitars.
Yeah, definitely, man. And I remember in 1990 when that record came out, I was like, Feel the Darkness was like the title. Like, I'd never even really heard them at the time that this record came out. Like, you know, back then there was no Spotify. You just kind of like listen to what your friends listen to. And that record came out with the album cover and the title. And I was like, there's no way that this is not something that I'm going to completely fucking love, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and of course it starts off with Plastic Bomb, which is like this epic song. And it combined, like, you know, it's funny you mentioned Metallica. You know, Metallica always had some of the best intros, like before the songs, like, blaze into you know, intensity. And this kind of, to me, structurally reminded me almost of a Metallica song, Plastic Bomb, with the piano intro and the, you know, careening guitar and introduction, and then it blasts into this like total aggressive like punk like vibe, you know, and incredible lyrics that explore like just the underbelly of life and society and hopelessness and depression, and just the best stuff that you can imagine, you know, like that. Not that it's good to be in the throes of those things, but if you're a disaffected, like 19-year-old kid, you know, it's perfect for you, you know?
Yeah. The funny thing is, like, there's like some German metal magazines and some long-lasting German punk magazines, and I'm not talking about like DIY fanzines, but like actual like magazines that you can buy at the train station. And the one is called Ox, so OX, which is like super, super popular. And the other one is called Plastic Bomb.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so a little bit of like legacy there, because I think Poison Idea again is a band primarily like punks will listen to it and crust punks, but also a lot of metal people are into them, because I think they're very accessible for metal people because of the sound and the darkness and the concepts. Yeah,
there's guitar solos and stuff like that. And now the interesting thing about Poison Idea, and I've had this discussion, was like, you know, years and years later, like in 1990, I didn't even know this other music I'm about to talk about existed. But in Japan, there was this like movement of hardcore punk bands, you know, with like Death Side and Gauze and all these super aggressive that were actually similar to what Poison Idea was doing on Feel the Darkness. And they were a huge influence on the band, because these bands were around in like the 80s. And, you know, just like that super aggressive metallic like punk sound with the guitar solos and the intro That was like a big thing with bands like Death Side and Paint Box, and all. Who these are other, as well. These bands are also T-shirt bands too. I mean, how many people do you know have Death Side and Gauze T-shirts?
Yeah, yeah. It's again like you can also reference like Septic Death in that vein, like of being one of these bands that are so iconic in their artwork that a lot of people like give them credit. And one band we absolutely love and is Integrity. And I know Dwid is like way into these Japanese bands, and he also is a big fan of Poison Idea. So
yeah, Gizm and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a bold statement, and I don't know, like maybe it's just like it's a thought, maybe it's a conspiracy theory, but
you think that the Earth is flat and
you want to prove me differently, man? Prove me differently. I'm texting my boy of like Stephen Carpenter, like he'll tell you off, man. No, it's actually I wanted to talk about the lizard people, that's my thing. Do you know that band Misfits? Like that punk band that some people know?
Oh, the band that has Michael Graves as the singer, you mean?
Also a T-shirt band. But I mean, we both like are super into all the stuff Danzig. And when Famous Monsters came out, like to me, that was the first record I think was with Graves as a singer.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was obsessed with the Misfits for so long, and then that record came out. I'm like, oh, what the fuck is this now? It's just like, okay, this is like a couple of bucks. It was super cheap. It's like, oh god, the artwork sucks already so bad. And I bought the record, and it started playing. I'm like, oh, so they're trying to be Poison Idea now, because it has this super chunky guitar tones. Like, I mean, honestly, I think I can play Famous Monsters while riding a car and not throwing it out of the window. It's okay. It's not Misfits to me, but just like the sound, like the super bassy, meaty kind of guitars that are on that record. I'm like, okay, someone tries to be Poison Idea now.
Yeah, I can see that, and it's a quick aside about the Misfits, the new NU Misfits, is I read a few years ago. I ordered this book, which was like a book about the Misfits, and then in the introduction, I read the preface first before getting into the book. And the guy who wrote it was talking about how when he first got into the Misfits, he didn't even realize that Danzig was the singer originally.
Yeah. Oh man, I know that book. It's the one where he talks about that, like his introduction to the Misfits was the Graves version, right?
Yeah. And like it blew my mind. And I was like, oh, so this is why this only got like 3 stars on Amazon, But I mean, at first I was like, I finished the book too. Like I read, like if I start a book, I always read it to the end, even if it's like horrible. I slog through it. You know what I mean? This wasn't horrible. It just was like I had to come to grips with the fact that there is a whole generation of people out there whose experience with the Misfits is completely different than mine, and I had to acknowledge that.
Yeah. And I mean, to this day, like these records, I don't know like how many they did. I know Famous Monsters, and then there was something with Psycho, I think. I don't know, like, but people, like a lot of people I know are really into them because also that was like kind of an introduction to the Misfits for them. And then it's like, where I again can say like I'm happy that I was a music nerd like earlier than like some of my peers. Because like I found out about the Misfits really early, and through them really early through like Danzig and Sam Hain. And I mean, Sam Hain is like I always think about like Sam Hain is like the most important Danzig band, and then like Danzig, and then the Misfits. But like it's a hierarchy thing that's debatable. But like I'm happy that I found them early. Yeah,
I agree with you about Sam Hain, but The thing I really appreciated about Danzig in general, and it's funny that we're talking about Danzig on this Portland episode, but as a young kid, all the horror stuff was like huge. Like that was like when I first started forming my personality. I think that I've always been really, really fascinated and obsessed with like horror and like monsters and dark stuff like that. And growing up, that was always considered like lowbrow, like kind of things, like you can't express like real ideas through that medium. And I think the Misfits and Samhain, when I was a kid discovering these bands, the Misfits, Samhain, and to some extent the Damned and Bauhaus were bands that used that language to really express deep emotion, and it didn't have like there was nothing funny about what they were doing, really. It was just like, especially Samhain, like that to me was like, okay, this is like some serious expression, like really deep emotional stuff going on. And that's why, and that I think set me on the, set me up to do what I do, like creatively, I guess,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Super influential. And I mean, to justify it, like, let's bridge the gap here. I'm pretty sure Danzig heard Poison Idea before. I'm pretty sure Danzig played a show in Portland at some point. And I'm pretty sure that people from Portland know who the Misfits are. So, like, we're covered. We're still okay to have this in our episode now.
Yeah. I imagine Danzig probably would be like, I don't really listen to like new music, that 1989 or whatever, if you talk to him, he's like, I only listen to like, Johnny Cash and stuff and, Roy Orbison, but like, so I don't know. I don't know if I heard of these guys, but then he's like, yeah, out of Portland. Yeah. The Poison Idea is good,
Oh, and Danzig was on an episode of Portlandia, that show about Portland.
Oh, so there we go. We tie it together. He played like a vampire or something.
Yeah, goth on the beach, like a vampire on the beach. Yeah. So okay, we're covered. Like no one, like don't downgrade our rating of the podcast. Yeah, man. So where do we go from here? So like Poison Idea started in 1980. The Wipers started in 1977. So like they're like long lasting old bands, and I mean Sage is dead, unfortunately. Pick Champion is dead. Jerry A just released a book, I think, or several books. I don't know, like, but he wrote stuff. A lot of the icons from Portland are dead by now. So yeah. I have another band that I would like to talk about. I don't know, like, what have you planned as next? Or should I go
for it? Those are my two big ones, really. I mean, for me.
All right.
Like,
Good.
So you can get into whatever you want after this, man.
Yeah, another band, like I spoke about, like a lot of metal people being into like these non-metal bands now. It's kind of like etiquette to like them. And one of the main bands that a lot of people, especially like the black metal underground in Germany, is all of a sudden for some years is into Dead Moon now. They've been a band that I've been like super into for so many years, and all of a sudden, like, everywhere people are running around with Dead Moon merch, and I mean they've got their t-shirt band now too. Like, I mean, I wear like merchandise of Dead Moon all the time. The iconic half moon skull they have. And they're also super influential, and they are like called the veterans of Portland of the Portland independent rock scene. I don't know, like, are you into Dead Moon? Do you like them?
I have a story about Dead Moon, actually. I don't dislike them, but I back in the 90s when I played in Otis. And you guys out there who are on Patreon know intimately what that band sounds like. We toured Europe with Fetus and Bark Market in like 95 or something like that. And on that tour, we played a number of these like festival dates. They weren't festivals like Roadburn or Hellfest or something like that. They were like small festivals. On two of there was like 3 back-to-back shows like this that had Dead Moon and the Chrome Cranks on it. And
oh man,
the Chrome Cranks I thought were horrible. First of all, and I'm like, oh, it's the guy who used to be in Sonic Youth is in that band, and I'm not a big Sonic Youth fan. I think that they're a kind of smoke and mirrors, mediocre musicians who are stealing ideas from Glenn Branca and Michael Gira. So. That's my opinion of Sonic Youth. So, But Dead Moon were like, oh, that sounds cool. Like they look cool. Like, you know, there's like they're probably into some like dark like shit. You know what I mean? But they were okay. You know, and I guess that's my opinion about them was that they were okay. Like I never felt compelled to really dive deeply into their catalog after seeing them live. So, so I don't know. Maybe I'm missing out.
Yeah, I mean, I put some stuff in the playlist. If you play the playlist, maybe some of the hits will speak to you. And I mean, they're kind of a band that I can see that people are not easily like getting into them because it's so lo-fi what they did, and that was like the whole idea about it. It's just like they try to write things that are as easily done as possible. They were not great musicians, and it's just like it's punk meets country meets garage rock. Like pretty much, they sound like the inventors of garage rock, if you want. They have such a cult following, and there has been a book released about them, which is also available in the States. It's like a super heavy A4, like a bit bigger than A4 even, like cardboard box outlet book about Dead Moon with a lot of photos and liner notes, and it's fucking amazing, and it's not expensive. So I mean, you're a big book fan, and maybe that's something you should get, and because the story of their band is really interesting. Fred Cole, the main guy, coming from the Rats, a band that he also played in with Sam Henry of the Wipers, who then went on to form Napalm Beach, another great band from Portland. Fred Cole, his wife Tootie Cole, and Andrew Loomis, they're like you say, they have an iconic look to them. They have this cool logo, and they like, first off, when I first saw the name pop up and like the artwork for In the Graveyard, the first album, I'm like, okay, this is some really dark, like I assume like goth rock or something. And it's not like this. It's really bluesy, kind of lo-fi, punkish music. But they're a band that grows so much if you like actually like get into like listening to a record 2 or 3 times. These melodies and songs will just stick with you. And they've been a part of my life for so long, and I love them so much. And they have a huge output, and I mean the Red stuff was like more punkish before that. That's cool. Dead Moon have a big catalog. Then they like kind of broke up, and then like Fred and Tootie started another band called Pierced Arrows, which kind of like sounded again like Dead Moon because that's all they can do. But yeah, man, they're like this one trick pony, but it works really well. So, sorry.
I think I would appreciate them more now, but you know, at the time, I just, in the context of how I experienced them, I was like, you know, these guys are all right, you know. But then over the years, so many people I know really dig them, but I just never felt compelled to dive deeply into their catalog.
Yeah, I think like they sound like a grimy version of X to me.
Oh, okay.
They have that male-female vocal thing, and I mean they do some covers, but it's just like, I mean, X are like, they can play, you know, and right. Dead Moon always sound like they're like kind of, actually they're kind of like Amon Ra. They didn't know, like when they started, they didn't know how to play, and they made this their tool of the trade. And Amon Ra, to this day, they like run around, play like these one chord things, like on one string. But it works, and it's like when you buy an Amon Ra record, you know what you'll get, and that's the same with Dead Moon in a way, but just like in a punk way. So yeah, I think you should like take a dive, like play the songs on the playlist and like included. But like I like records like Into the Graveyard, Defiance, and Nervous Never Changes. They're really good albums. And yeah, Fred Cole, he like, people in Portland actually like, from what I heard, like they have like a treaty. They want to have like a statue for him because he's such an icon in Portland.
That's kind of cool, actually. Yeah,
yeah, it's really like the love for this band. Like they have such a like outstandingly. I mean, as I said, like the Wipers are probably like on a musical level the most influential band. But when it comes to the spirit of the DIY thing and like just like playing by your own rules, and that, like that's kind of what Dead Moon captivated perfectly. And so people want to have a statue of Fred Cole, and I can see like a statue like the one of Jimi Hendrix in Belfast. Not Jimi Hendrix, Phil Lynott. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that, how they have a statue in Belfast to him, and that's what comes to mind.
Yeah, and that's like I would back that. I would even donate money to have them build that. Yeah.
Now after this, in another 2 or 3 months, you're going to see me with Dead Moon T-shirt on,
dude. And it would be rightfully so, because it's just a fucking lovable band. Like there are these bands, you read their story and you think like, kind of assholes. Like we always wanted to do like an episode on Killing Joke. And whenever I talk to Killing Joke, like to people about Killing Joke, they're like, "Oh yeah, I met Jazz. He's an asshole," and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And we know like how complicated Michael G. Raw is, but like with Dead Moon, they're just like they did what they loved. They got all in. They lived from doing that. They lived their like punk life way until the end when Fred died, and then Andrew died. And like Tootie now to this day, she lives off like the merch that she prints and like goes to like these fan fests of Dead Moon. And there's like a Facebook group about Dead Moon that people are like so committed, and they love this band so much. And I appreciate that. So that's why I have so much merch of Dead Moon, because it's just fucking cool. They're an excellent band, and they're totally worth like all the praise. Yeah.
So yeah, I should definitely check out Dead Moon. Maybe I'll like them more now.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's these are like, for me, they are like the classics when it comes to Portland. Just maybe a quick thing, because I talked about that band Doomtown, which was like this German crust band that had like this one demo tape and LP, which kind of like blew everybody's minds back then, where there were these crust bands that all sounded like Portland's own Tragedy. I'm a big fan of His Hero Is Gone. I love From Ashes Rise, but they're all like people involved in Tragedy too, but like from back then they were still in Memphis. And I don't know what happened, but like when His Hero Is Gone broke up in 99, I think like Todd, Paul, and Yannick, they moved to Portland and started Tragedy there with another guy. And yeah, Tragedy, like this record Vengeance, is to this day one of the best and like outstanding crust records when it comes to like more metallic American crust. I think you like stuff like this too, right?
Yeah, I do, definitely. I'm more partial to His Hero's Gone, because I felt like that. I felt like His Hero's Gone stuff was more original, and Tragedy to me, to me just felt like American versions of Scandinavian hardcore, really. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's still like that one. I mean, they have a bunch of records out and splits and shit. But like that one record, Vengeance, and I put like 2 songs of that record on the playlist. That's like, it's like a pop music record, because it's just hit after hit after hit. And the Scandinavian bands like Martyr Jud and Skid System, they're like more harsh in a way.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, His Hero Is Gone. They have to like they were something else, man. There's just like this German band Acme that like Jamie put out on Edison Records back then. It has like this metallic edge to it, and is more like actual like just crust punk or something like. But yeah, that one Tragedy record is cool, and I just wanted to plug them that they're from Portland too. Yeah.
Well, speaking of Acme, there's like that whole little scene of bands from Bremen that are awesome. Like Merzer and Keitzer.
Sistral.
Yeah, System. Well, I don't pronounce it as well as you do. But yeah, that was those bands are all great.
Yeah, and it's funny, like when we played with Gods and Queens, and I like talked to Jamie, and I don't know how we ended up there, and he's like, "Yeah, man, Edison was my label." I'm like, "Really?" So you put out Acme and Overcast, and I think even Starkweather or something. And so yeah, it's a lot of stuff came together. Like I think through meeting you or getting to know you, I like met a lot of cool like Junius and Gods and Queens and Jamie and like all these cool cats, man. And then it goes full circle when all of a sudden you find out like that this one record by Acme that is still outstandingly good from a German band was put out on an American label by someone who's a friend of yours now. Yeah.
That's actually my favorite period of hardcore is like that 90s version,
Yeah,
with those
yeah.
bands you just mentioned. Yeah, I don't know. I just thought those bands were like doing interesting things at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's like unfortunately I was too young back then to actually like appreciate them. Like when I started going to shows, it was like 2 or 3 years too late. I mean, I saw Mercer and like I could have seen Zustral, their record Black Smoker. Like if you're talking about like death metal punk, like that's the one record you should listen to. But yeah, man, Acme was too early, and like that Acme record to reduce the choir to one soloist still. Like it's from 95 or 96, I think, and still blows my mind.
We played with Mercer Tombs
Oh, right.
in
You
Bremen.
did, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like, I remember going, we showed up at the venue and I'm looking at the flyer and it says Mercer's playing. I'm like, what is this, some kind of fucking joke or something like that? So I asked, I asked the guy, the promoter, I'm like, what's this all about? Like, they're still active. They were still, at that point, we're putting out records still.
They still do, dude.
Yeah.
They just played that. They played their 20th anniversary show, like, and they still work on new stuff. And the Kiteser singer is in that band now too. I mean, like back in the late 90s or like early 2000s, I think. They even like cooperate, like they did a comic book, like they had like a German comic book, and they wrote the music for the comic book. So you could have like the paperback getting together with a CD of like 4 exclusive Mercer songs.
Yeah, I met all those guys at that show, like the guys from Kite. There's actually a photograph online somewhere of everyone together, like.
Nice.
It's kind of cool, man. Like, 'cause like these are bands I loved, and it was really fun to like hang out with everyone and meet people and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's getting back to our city of Portland. I think maybe one old school thing before we maybe go into contemporary things that are cool.
Sure.
I'm a big fan of Elliott Smith. And even though he's been associated with LA most of the times, and he spent like the last part of his life in New York, he grew up. He was born in Nebraska, but he grew up in Portland, and he released his first 2 records in the time when he was still in Portland. And I'm not like a super big fan of singer-songwriter stuff, so like I'm big fan of Townes Van Zandt, and like of course like we talked about Roy Orbison. We all love Johnny Cash. Songs Ohio is great, and but yeah, man, Elliott Smith, I really love that guy. Like his albums, Tragic Figure, died of stab wounds to the heart, so fitting. Still not clear if it was murder or suicide. But yeah, man, like Elliott Smith is a Portlandian too. So like that maybe being one of the classics too, before we go to contemporary events. Do you like Elliott Smith?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm not, it's something that I'm peripherally into, you know what I mean? Like I have certain things, that are cool the stuff I've heard I enjoy. But I don't, really delve too deeply into the singer-songwriter genre.
Yeah, he's just, I think to me, he's something special because like his lyrics are so good, and it's so, I mean, this is so dark and like, and just like bleak, like how emotional he was and how sad. And the music seems so fragile, even when he had like a backing band. It's still like fragile, but fragile in a good way. Like there are fragile bands where I just think like, no, I cannot listen to this. But it's just like there's something about it, man. I don't know, like that just like so compelling and speaks to me. So yeah, I always like say that like Justin Sullivan of New Model Army and Elliott Smith, they saved my life on a bunch of occasions, just like through their music and their lyrics. Yeah.
He was in that band Heat Miser too, prior to his solo singer-songwriter career, I think.
Correct.
Too, right? Yeah.
Yes. Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Bunch of newer stuff. What do you have?
Well, one of like there's a whole array of newer bands, the contemporary bands in Portland that I love. Okay, but I'm going to start off with probably the band that I've been a fan of the longest out of this slew of new bands. And I say new in parentheses because some of these bands have been around for like quite a while at this point. But but compared to the Wipers, they're new. So, but the first band I want to talk about is Atriarch, which they have a bunch of material out on Relapse, and just another band that's hard to classify because they have like a doom sort of vibe. They've got a black metal feel to them, but they also have this like goth post-punk thing going on. And a number of years ago, Lenny was actually, I had him on as a guest
I
on
remember
Everything
that.
Went Black. Yeah. So, if you guys want to go back and check out our episode we did together, you get a little bit more insight into where they're coming from. But yeah, just like, dudes wearing black into like dark stuff, man, and the music just has this like oppressive like vibe to it.
As when I started like texting back and forth with Davey of Dry Wedding, I always come up with also in that episode we did about Murder Braid. I always like think about like good descriptions of bands because I'm not a fan of like categorizing bands for like, oh yeah, this is black metal, this is not black metal, but it's just like when I listen to this stuff, I think about like, okay, which bands come to mind listening to that, and I have like one for Murder Bait and I have one for Dry Wedding, but like when Atriarch, when I first heard about them, and that was when their first EP came out, to me they sounded like Neurosis trying to play like a Fields of the Nephilim song.
I could see that. Yeah, definitely. The first stuff I heard from them was the split with Alaric, which features like the vocalist from Dead and Gone, which is one of my top 20 favorite bands actually. And they're based in San Francisco, so I was kind of like more interested in them because I knew that the guy from Dead and Gone was in the band. But then I heard the Alaric part, and I was like, man, the Atriarch part, and I was like, man, this is like really cool. From then I just went into their whole catalog, and I ended up meeting those guys through Jeff Wilson from Knock Mystium, and I've been and then Max played drums for Wolfhammer when we toured with them, so that's how the camaraderie sort of developed, but they're just, aside from all that, they're just a great band. And if you're into like just dreary, heavy music with like excellent vocals and a lot of atmosphere, that's exactly how I would describe them.
Yeah, perfect. What's the drummer's name?
Max.
Yeah, and I think he's the bridge to another like contemporary band, and probably one of the most popular bands touring the world, making tons of money through merch from Portland, which is Softkill. They are Tobias Graves' other band. Like, it started out as a side project of Pleasure Grave, a band that I treasure very much. But yeah, back then he was heavy into drugs, and he talked about it openly, being a junkie and fucking people out of money to get drugs. So kind of like the Knock Mystium deal of
Blake.
Blake Judd, right? But Softkill was like the side project and turned into a full band now, and they're going at full steam, man. They have like a bunch of full lengths out. They constantly release demos of stuff, and they're very DIY. And they are like publicly acclaimed stars now in a way. Like when they brought over Chameleons to the States to tour. They brought over Pink Turns Blue to tour. Even like Tobias played like with the Chameleons for some shows. And I don't know, man, they just like developed such a cult following now. And everybody around the world seems to love Softkill. And I can't argue with them, man. Like I haven't met these guys, and but like their records are always good, at least good. Some of them are really great. They work hard, relentlessly. I can dig the work ethic, and they're just one of these bands, like they did the grind for so long, dragging their carcasses out of the mud, like literally. Like he was living on the street as a junkie, and now he's doing good, has kid, and like tours. His band's successful. Great contact to the fans from what I see, and I love that. Like that's cool. So like Soft Kill is a band that I definitely like give a shout out to.
Yeah, I recently started checking them out too. I mean, I remember maybe a year ago, they came up next on this when I was listening to Apple Music, and I think I was listening to a Bambara LP, and the algorithm put a Soft Kill track next.
Dude, it's on Spotify. It's the same fucking thing. I think whenever you listen to something that's remotely post-punk, Soft Kill will be the first stuff they play. So that's like where I saw like, okay, they must have gotten really big though, so that Spotify always plugs them first.
Yeah, and I remember enjoying it, and then talking to different people, the name kept coming up, and that's actually one of the reasons why I was like reluctant to really check them out, because so many people were like, oh yeah, Soft Kill. I'm like, wow, how good could they be if everyone likes them,
Yeah.
But then when you told me about it, that's like someone whose opinion I really value, and that's what made me dive deeper into their music, and I actually do enjoy what they're doing.
Yeah. It's like they call themselves like sad rock at some point, because they just say like, yeah man, we're not post-punk, we're not goths. I mean, they look like hip-hop kids, and they're just like, yeah, we play music that is like kind of sad and melancholic, and that's cool. Like they don't give a fuck about categories. They do what they love, and some records they sound like almost indie records. Then like the newer stuff is again goes more into like what the Mission did, and like they just like go all over the block and just play the music that they actually like in this minute. But it's always like you can always clearly hear it's that kind of music from this band. So it's not like jumping the bandwagon to the next trend. They're just like doing whatever the fuck they want, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, totally.
So what else do we have?
Well, I since we didn't do a proper episode on Dry Wedding, I think we should talk about them. I mean, we did a Murder Bait episode, and there was an interview with Casey. So, we're going to mention that as a band that I'm like obsessed with, I guess, is a way of putting it, because I actually, since the incident when we all sort of connected, that's, I would say 80% of what I've been listening to is Murder Bait, Dry Wedding, and another band called Shadowland, which connects those two bands. Casey plays drums in that band, and Davey's partner is a guitar player, and Casey's wife is the vocalist, and so it's like this kind of family affair sort of thing. And and Shadowland's just amazing, but we can talk about them later.
Yeah, man, Dry Wedding. That's like I spoke to, like, as I said, like I like write back and forth with Davey like a lot, and it's like I hated so much being stuck in Germany, like with all these cool bands and cool people like somewhere around the globe, but not here. And I actually like knew Dry Wedding from their first record, The Long Road, because I like. Davey asked me that, like, how did you find out about that band? And I was like, yeah, there was an announced band. I think it was a 4AD band called not Dry Wedding, Dry Cleaning. And I saw like pictures of them. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, I am going to check that out. So I was like half asleep and like typed in Dry on Spotify, and it's like, oh, there's the band. Like it had two words, and I put it on. I'm like, that's an odd cover artwork. And it's like, wow, this is way darker than I expected it to be. And it's like, oh wait, no, that's another band. That's Dry Wedding. That's kind of a weird name, but like it's not Dry Cleaning. And I was like, oh, this is fucking cool. So like I was like awake late on a work day, I remember, and then like I had to play The Long Road in its entirety. I'm like, holy shit, man, what the fuck is this band? This is excellent. And it has so many traits of what I love. And so I was listening to this, and then like, yeah, when we started like writing back and forth with Casey, and all of a sudden it's like Davey reached out and it's like, yeah, hi, I'm Davey. I play in that band. And we started talking, and he's like, yeah, and we have that record that came out last year. I'm like, really? There was like, fuck, man, there was a record last year called Sway. And dude, I swear to God, if I had known this record last year, it would have made my top 5 of the year.
Well, that's how I feel about it too. Actually, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
such a great record. You know.
It has everything that we're into. Like, you know, like, I mean, you guys out there listening to us babbling about music all the time. It's like Mike and I, we kind of dig a lot of the same stuff. And when I listened to The Long Year Road, I was like, oh yeah, I have to tell Mike about this. But then I was listening to Sway, and it's like 3 steps forward to them. And again, like, weird comparison, but to me that sounds like how did I describe that? I think I said, like, if Mighty Sphincter played Talk songs together with Earth. Yeah.
I could see that. Yeah, yeah. There's that's actually the new Murder Bait record too.
Yeah.
You know, Nostalgia Like Cancer is that kind of, you know, it's funny you mentioned Earth, because the newest, most current modern version of Earth has like this like clean guitar, like kind of country like vibe to it.
Yeah.
And I can see how that informs maybe the listening experience for both the new Murder Bait record and the latest Dry Wedding records, because there is a little bit of that in the music too.
Do you know that band, the Tinder Sticks?
Yeah. Actually, in Necromaniacs, we talked about them because of Trouble Every Day. You know, they did the score for that.
They to me, like, I love them. I've seen them a bunch of times live, and they're a great band. And they're like this overtly theatrical kind of, like, in their music. It's like really pompous, but like still down to earth. And to me, Murder Bait is the funeral version of that.
Yeah,
You know?
except I like Casey's vocals way more than the dude that tended to Sticks.
Yeah, no, I just meant like the way the music floats, you know, like it has this drama and heaviness to it without being actually heavy. Like, there's no like hard guitars in there. It's just like, it's gloom all the time, like with both of these bands. Dry Wedding is the more, I don't know, like more, not poppy, but like it's not as no, it's like the one is more doomish in a way. The other more is like that birthday party kind of like spazzy rhythms and like weird textures. Yeah,
it's more. There's more of I hesitate to say upbeat vibe.
Yeah,
Dry Wedding, but the same way the birthday party has like an upbeat quality to it. Not that the music's upbeat itself, but there's like. You know, it's more rhythmic in some ways. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And also, and Davey and I talked about this. They incorporate all these instruments, man. Like when you listen to Dry Wedding, you hear textures in there, and I wasn't exactly sure how some of those sounds were being made. And then in the interview with Davey, he goes into how he made all those sounds, and it reminded me of the Roland Howard documentary Autoluminescence, where he talked about shaping like feedback by using all these contact mics and things like that. So there's a lot of that, man, and I'm always impressed when people play multiple instruments and they incorporate all these different sounds, because you know, I mean, you and I, like, you know, I'm like, I'm not that great of a guitar player, you know what I mean? I'm just kind of like, I do what I do, you know, like I'm like, I think I'm doing okay because I know how to play guitar, but if you give me like some other instrument, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing with, like a dulcimer or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of like, I like to fuck around with like instruments in school because there's a lot of stuff flying around, but it never like made its way onto a record so far. But like with the new Ultra, we like played around with soundscapes too, and Andy is like really good at that. But yeah, man, listening to Dry Wedding, it was like, okay, man, like the next progressive step for Ultha is also like experimenting more with sounds. I mean, I think we've got the soundscapey thing that Murder Bait has. I think we have that already, but I want to get into like more textures of different stuff. So we'll see about that. I mean, it's going to be a long time until like another Ultha record, if ever, comes out. But yeah, like these two records, man, like the new Murder Bait and the last Dry Wedding, they are really like pushing me to like, I want to write new stuff and I want to be more creative when it comes to that.
So that leads us to the band that bridges both of those bands, and that's Shadowlands. And I as soon in the midst of all this stuff, I bought all their stuff too, man, like on Bandcamp, and so just enthralled with that band, especially the record 003, which I'm assuming is their third record, and the song "The End." And I actually mentioned this song twice on both both episodes. It's like Julie Cruz, meets like The Cure, meets like, just some, if there was like a senior prom that happens at midnight outside, that's what it reminds me of. Just like some, longing, it's such a good, excellent band. And what immediately comes to mind is Julie Cruz, who does, was from the Twin Peaks soundtrack and all that. A lot of David Lynch utilizes her quite a bit. So
some of these songs were like, I listened to that band and like, I mean, I've known them before. I had them on my radar, but ever since like Casey was like, yeah, I play drums in that band. It's like, oh, I need to give us like a more attention now. And I was playing their stuff. I'm like, okay, so finally a band that like incorporates only theater of pain without actually like messing it up, there's this heavy early Christian death vibe going on, and they do it in a really well executed way.
I could see that, but without the decadence of Roz, you know what I mean? It doesn't have any of that decadence. Like there's this like very pure emotional quality to their music, you know what I mean? Without the cynicism,
Absolutely. Agreed.
And I can't. I've been listening to that 003 record probably more than anything right now, actually. And in the last few days, like the new Watain came out, the new Napalm Death is out there. Prior to that, I was listening to Tomb for Two by Lebanon Hanover every day, and this is like, even though this record's a little bit older, it usurped those records. So now it's like part of my everyday listening diet, is that 003 by Shadowlands.
Yeah, that's for me is with the Dry Wedding and the Murder Braid record. That's like everything I play besides the new two Ryan Adams records. It's just like, yeah, this is so cool. And I'm so happy that we're like in touch with these guys. And I mean, you probably will meet them on that tour, right?
Well, we made plans because I'm going to be in Portland on this tour. And I already notified both of those guys, Davey and Casey, and we're gonna hang out and and get coffee or drink, sort of get like some lunch or dinner or whatever. But it's interesting because we're playing San Francisco the night before, and that's a 12-hour drive. But we always do that drive overnight, so I'll be in Portland earlier in the day, so there's not that pressure, you know what I mean? So I'll be able to hang out. And get to know those guys.
Oh, sweet, fantastic. And also like Portland in itself, we haven't talked about the city, but like Portland's actually like a really interesting and beautiful city that I really like. I mean, I've been there once on my honeymoon, I mean, for me as a vegan, that was an absolute dream there because like Portland and Seattle, they're like the vegan spots of the world in a way. Had my first, like, ever since I turned vegan, had my first donut there at like Voodoo Donut.
Oh yeah.
It's like one of these classic spots. And I actually like, there was this band called Black Hole of Calcutta, which was like a grind power violence band, and like Planks played with them on one of their tours here. It was a 2-piece band. And the drummer Jesse plays in Bellwitch now, so he moved to Seattle and he's a drummer for Bellwitch. And Ian and his girlfriend back then, they hosted us like when Danny and I were in Portland, and they showed us around and took us to these great food places. And we met the Graves at Sea guys back then, and it was just such a cool experience. And Portland seems so far away from where I am right now, and ever since the war started, the prices for flights are just insane and unpayable, and like going to the West Coast is even more expensive. So I'll probably be back in Portland when I win the lottery or something.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what the city's like after all the stuff that's happened recently. With the riots and just this like divide that's going on that we've been talking about
Yeah.
offline in my country here, the United States. So
Yeah.
yeah, Portland's like a very extreme city in some ways, and I mean I like it. It's cool. Like it's Northwest is a beautiful part of the country. So we'll see
Yeah.
how it is when we finally get there.
Yeah, and when you go there, please give both these guys a nice handshake from me because I don't think you're a hugger.
No, I'm definitely a hugger, man. I'm like someone who likes to hug people. But
Yeah, then give these guys a hug and please like take a picture like you did with Brandon. Shout outs to Brandon Legion. So I can at least feel incorporated in a bit, like seeing you guys living the life, And
well, I mean, hopefully things, as everyone knows, I'm a bit of a pessimist, but I kind of feel like things are starting to turn around a little bit. If we don't get annihilated in a nuclear inferno, that is. But there's always that grim specter of death, of nuclear death laying out there. But, if you take that out of the picture and there isn't like a civil war in this country, that's another thing that's, always out there in the wings. If those two things don't happen, I see things turning around in this world.
Well, and hopefully then we'll have more good music coming from great bands out of Portland.
Yeah, totally. Oh, we forgot to mention Chromatics.
Yeah, I just thought about like, should we like do that as well? Like we already mentioned so many bands, but yeah, man, like Chromatics is also like an outstanding band that comes from Portland. Totally different from all the stuff we talked about prior, right?
Yeah, but they're kind of, I would put them roughly in the same category as like Shadowlands, maybe.
Yeah, more electronic, more sexy in a way.
Yes.
I mean, they've got that label. Italians do it better, and like that already says everything. That incorporate like Italian disco music. All these bands on that roster have like their own unique look, which is all really fitting, like this pulp '70s kind of thing going on. And the Chromatics, they're like this electronic, well, not punk, but electronic band. And they also have like a background, like I think they're the relations to the Blood Brothers and these kind of bands, so like the 3-1G scene,
right? Yeah,
and then also, I mean, like they appeared in Twin Peaks in the news, like in the 3rd season, and there we have the connection to Julie Cruz again. So yeah, it's very interesting music. I always love that they open their records with cover versions. Some of them are in the playlist as well. Just like such an interesting band from the way it is. They portray themselves and like they develop like this, I don't know, like this persona as a band from the looks and everything, how they appear, which is just outstandingly good. And yeah, so also another great band coming from Portland.
Yeah, they're connected to that 3-1G world, GSL, like San Diego, kind of like post emo, like whatever you want to call it. And but yeah, man, the Blood Brothers, I find that band completely unlistenable, man. Honestly. But Chromatics, like I was aware of them, but I really latched onto them during Twin Peaks season 3, the first episode.
Yep.
That segue, like it was so magical, man. Honestly, I remember staying up late to watch the premiere of that episode, the first episode. So, I was already tired by the time it ran its course. And then I'm like, oh, there's going to be a musical guest in each episode. This is so interesting,
Yep.
And it was like on the heels of like a fan service a little bit, where some of the characters are there and, that you haven't seen in a long time. And then that song Shadow was like such a beautiful song, man. I have to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. Like there's this like beauty and darkness combined in a very unique and beautiful way. And that's just like it's beautiful music. That's all I think like the best thing about to say that it's just like it's beautiful music by a very very handsome band.
in there's a video for Shadow, and I don't know if you noticed this or not, but the guitar player is wearing that ring with the green gemstone in it.
Oh wow! Okay, no, I didn't know that.
Which
That's
for
cool.
you David Lynch nerds out there, that's is in Firewalk with Me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one of I myself like gotten to be a ring guy, like not to like extent that I wear like a lot of rings, but like I can deal with rings, and like this is something I really always thought about getting. Well, then a gold ring is really like, I don't know, pimps wear that.
Dude, that would be so sick if you had a gold. Like, you started wearing gold, like
Yeah.
gold chains and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, man, you know, like I'm all gray now. I'm 42 and still like I'm rocking Hawaiian shirts in the summer. Maybe gold is next step. You know, like my style icon is Max Cady and Cape Fear. So shout out to De Niro for giving me the looks, you know.
Yeah, I've been known to wear a ring. I got like a nice skull ring. I got a couple of those. You know.
Well, I assumed it would be like one of these how do they call it, like these bead like where you pee people to death with. Like that's kind of what I expected you, like the breast knocks or something. You know?
Yeah, I have like one of those like blinged out, rings that covers all four fingers. It just says like power.
Ew.
It says power.
And then you get another one that says white.
No, definitely not. But just real quick about excuse me, about the I could see Murder Bait, Shadowlands, and Dry Wedding would be perfect for one of those musical guests on the third season of Twin Peaks.
Oh, dude, absolutely, yes. Yeah, but it's the shame. I mean, ever since we've gotten in touch with these guys, I've been working my ass off here to get them a label to release their records. And like all the people are like that I talked to, they're like, "Oh fuck, this is amazing," but it's already been released, so I can't do it. I'm like, it's like, what the hell, man? It's just like because nobody knows about them. I have the feeling that they're like this inside thing. That no one knows about. So like does it need to be like, okay, I released this brand new record with a single? Just like there must be one label that just like, here's this record or these records and says like, okay, this is so fucking good, I can turn around like 300 albums of that. So yeah, if you're out there listening to this and by the time that this airs and I still haven't found a label to them, or I decided to go all in and just like start my own fucking label to release these two records, please feel free to hit them up and just release these two fucking records of awesome bands, please.
And in the interim, definitely go to their respective Bandcamp pages and purchase those records. Just like me and Ralph did, purchase them because that means a lot to people in this day and age.
Yeah, I ordered physical copies from them, and and it's not expensive. They have like merchandise, they have their old records on vinyl, and the excellent 10-inch that Murder Bait put out 2 years ago, which is on Sentient Ruin. They still have copies of that, so please, people, go out there, check out Shadowlands, Dry Wedding, and Murder Bait, and like give these people your money because they're deserving. And they should continue doing excellent music.
Yeah. So do me a favor. Next time you're out there and you're spending $10 on a Budweiser or something like that, think about how you could be reappropriating that small 10 and put it towards one of these records. So just if you guys could do me that favor, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Well, that's our Portland episode.
I think that we did it. Yeah.
Yeah, man. So yeah, when this is aired, I will be out on the road, and I don't think we have any holds in the schedule, which is good as far as like episodes go. There's a couple of cool Q&As that are being put out there on the Patreon. So if you guys want to get more content that's a little bit different than what we talk about on the regular show, definitely sign up for the Patreon. And also follow us check us out on Instagram as well as Facebook. There is a Twitter account, but I never use Twitter because it's a cesspool of ignorance and depravity, which I'm not interested in. Things get auto tweeted, so those of you out there be like, "Oh, I just saw a tweet from you, Mike. You're full of shit." No, I'm not full of shit. I actively do not engage on Twitter, so it's an auto tweet.
Yeah. Twitter is pretty much like watching the sadness in real life.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot for listening, guys. And some of you I hope to see out there. And definitely feel free to stop by and say hello at one of these shows. And I'll talk to you next time. Take care.
Never win, living in the truth.